What if I told you that locking eyes with your dog triggers the same brain chemistry as a mother bonding with her newborn? Or that rubbing your dog's ears floods both your brains with feel-good chemicals? The truth is, dogs aren't just animals. They're wired into our biology in ways that are profound and uniquely human. Hello, welcome to Superbrain, the podcast for everyone with a brain. My name is Sabina Brennan, and today's episode is for the dog lovers amongst you. And I suppose it's also for those who just don't get how much we love our dogs. Because the human-dog bond isn't simply emotional, it's evolutionary, neurological, hormonal, and deeply personal. With shrinking social circles and falling birth rates, dogs are stepping into emotional spaces once occupied by children, close family, or community. And I'm not kidding you there. Psychologists even suggest that dog-human bonds can be more positive and more reliable than many human-human relationships. I don't think that's too much of a surprise. Certainly not to the dog lovers amongst us. My dogs are always happy to see me. Today I'm exploring what makes this bond so powerful, what happens in the brain, why evolution made this possible, and how you can use science to deepen the connection with your own dog. So a bit of context. Dogs were the first domesticated species, thousands of years before cattle, horses, or sheep. Early wolves who could tolerate humans gained food and protection. Over generations, the wolves who were friendliest, least fearful, and best able to read human behavior survived and reproduced. What began as mutual survival gradually evolved into companionship. Fast forward to today, and dogs are no longer only our guards, hunters, herders, scent detectors, or assistance animals. For millions of people, myself included, they are also surrogate children, emotional anchors, best friends, and in many homes, primary companions. So what's the science behind this relationship we have with our four-legged friends? Oxytocin, the love hormone, isn't just a human phenomenon. A landmark study in 2015 found that when dogs and their owners gaze into each other's eyes, both experience a measurable rise in oxytocin. That's the same neurochemical loop that bonds parents and infants. And as I alluded to earlier, it's often referred to as the love hormone or the cuddle hormone. Add touch into the mix and the effect is amplified. Gentle stroking of your dog activates C-tactile fibers. They're the same nerve fibers underlying emotional touch in humans. Crucially, this oxytocin feedback loop doesn't occur in wolves, even hand-raised ones, suggesting that dogs evolved a unique biological pathway for bonding with us. Using MRI scanners, scientists like Gregory Burns have trained dogs to lie still, fully awake, while researchers measure their neural activity. One striking finding is that dogs' reward centers, particularly an area of the brain called the caudate nucleus, shows stronger activation for the scent of their humans than for unfamiliar people, and sometimes even stronger than for food. That's attachment, not opportunism. EEG research, that's when they put electrodes on the head and measure the electrical activity in the brain, offers further insights. So it appears that dogs differentiate between meaningful words and nonsense words, producing neural signatures similar to language processing in toddlers. In other words, dogs don't just react to tone, they build mental models of meaningful words, recognizing concepts, not just the sounds themselves. When I say that dogs form mental representation of meaningful words, I don't simply mean they recognize familiar sounds. What current research shows is much more sophisticated and much closer to early language processing in human toddlers than we once imagined. EEG studies conducted in 2024 showed that dogs' brains respond differently to words they genuinely know, for example, ball, walk, treat, compared with nonsense words that sound familiar. If dogs were simply reacting to tone or excitement in our voice, their neural responses would look the same, but they don't. Instead, when a meaningful word is spoken, dogs show a distinct pattern of brain activity, suggesting they're retrieving an internal concept, a mental picture or expectation of that thing or action. In other words, the word ball doesn't just sound pleasant, it activates a representation of ballness, the object, the play, the sequence of events that follow. This goes beyond associative learning, this sound means reward. It means dogs mentally map words onto the world. It's not language as we humans experience it, but it is symbolic understanding, a cognitive ability we once believed was uniquely human. So their memory and cognition goes far beyond sit and stay. For years, dogs were underestimated cognitively, and that view has changed recently. Claudia Fugaza's Do As I Do research fundamentally changed what scientists believed dogs were capable of remembering. Traditionally, episodic memory, the ability to recall personal past events, episodes from your life, hence the name, was thought to be uniquely human, or at best limited to a few highly intelligent species like corvids or dolphins. Dogs were assumed to live mostly in the present moment. But Fugaza's work showed something very different. In her studies, dogs were trained to imitate human actions when given the cue, do it. For example, a dog might watch a person touch an umbrella, then on hearing the cue, do it, repeat that action. That alone is very impressive. It shows dogs can map human behavior onto their own bodies. But here's where it becomes really remarkable. Fugaza introduced unexpected delays. Instead of immediately asking the dog to imitate the action, she had the owner behave normally for a while, sit down, chat, walk around, and only then give the do it cue. Despite the distraction and the time gap, dogs were still able to recall what they had seen the human do earlier and reproduce that action. They were remembering a one-off event that wasn't linked to a reward, wasn't rehearsed, and wasn't signaled in advance. That is the essence of episodic-like memory. Storing a single moment, holding on to it, retrieving it later when needed. What's more, the memory persisted even after several minutes and without any indication that imitation would be required. This demonstrates that dogs don't just store training commands like sit or stay, they also store spontaneous, unrehearsed memories about things humans do. This skill is also part of why dogs are so attuned to our routines, our gestures, and our behaviors. They aren't just reacting in the moment, they're quietly building a memory library of our actions, expressions, and habits. They even show cross-modal matching, hearing a voice and then picking out the matching face, suggesting integrated social memory, so being able to match a voice with a specific face. Another really interesting science perspective on the close relationship between dogs and humans is looking at dogs as a model for human brain aging. Now that sounds a bit mad, I know, but dogs live in our homes, they eat our food, they breathe our air, they share our chemicals and our stressors, and that makes them ideal for studying brain aging. In canine cognitive dysfunction, which is the dog version of dementia, MRI scans reveal cortical shrinkage, beta amyloid accumulation, and behavioral parallels with Alzheimer's disease. So the Dog Aging Project is now sequencing tens of thousands of canine genomes to understand why some dogs age well and others decline early. Work that has direct implications for human longevity and brain health research. So we'll watch that space for sure. So why do dogs make us feel better? Stroking a dog for just 10 minutes lowers human cortisol levels, it raises our serotonin and dopamine levels, and it slows down our heart rate. At the same time, dogs show increases in oxytocin and endorphins, producing physiological relaxation. This is why therapy dogs work so well in hospitals, in dementia care, and in universities. They're not just comforting, they're co-regulating our nervous systems. So tools in 3. Harness the benefits of mutual gaze. Look into your dog's eyes for a few seconds. It'll boost your oxytocin and their oxytocin. So it's not indulgent, it's actually biological bonding. Touch with purpose. Slow ear rubs and chest rubs and belly rubs activate emotional touch pathways. It's calming for them and it's calming for you. Share routines. Dogs thrive on predictability. And routines are pretty good for us too. So, routine walks, games, and silly little rituals strengthen the attachment through repetition. So they're just 3 little tools that you can use to strengthen your bond with man's best friend and woman's best friend, my best friend. Anyway, science simply confirms what most of us dog lovers already knew. Dogs meet us in joy, they sit with us in grief, and they remind us what unconditional connection feels like. From oxytocin to memory, from evolution to aging, the dog-human bond isn't just emotional, it's biological, it's cultural, and it's one of the most successful partnerships in the history of our species. The next time your dog curls up beside you, remember, that warmth isn't just sentimental. It's your nervous system's syncing.